At 11:47 p.m., my radio turned on by itself. There was no static, no music. Just a calm male voice saying, "Tomorrow's confirmed deaths. Please listen carefully." I reached for the switch, my hand hesitating in the dark. The voice continued, smooth and unhurried. First name, Daniel Croft. Time of death, 6:12 a.m. Daniel Croft was my neighbor, a retired teacher who walked his dog every morning. I tried to dismiss it as a prank, a weird late-night broadcast. But at 6:12, the next morning, the piercing wail of an ambulance siren cut through the quiet street, its red and white lights flashing against my window. It parked right outside his house. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This couldn't be real. The radio belonged to my father. It was an old analog model, with a scratched wooden case and a dial that glowed a faint amber. No digital screen, no Bluetooth, just a simple knob to turn through the frequencies. He used to say some frequencies never die, who's to wait? He had a strange way of looking at the world. That night, the station called itself AM 104.6. I spent an hour searching for it online. Every database, every list of local and national broadcasters. It didn't exist. It was a ghost frequency. Just as I was about to give up and unplug the cursed thing, the voice returned, as clear as before. Second name, Maria Elson. Time of death, las 9:43. I whispered to the empty room. This is fake. But my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold my phone steady. Because Maria Elson worked at the same office as me, she sat just 3 desks away. I told myself it was a coincidence, a cruel, impossible coincidence. I barely slept, replaying the calm, detached voice in my head over and over again. The next morning at work, I couldn't take my eyes off Maria. She was laughing, telling a story about her cat, completely alive, completely normal. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was all just a nightmare. A stupid, twisted prank. I watched the clock on my computer screen. Las 9:40, las 9:41. At 9:42, she stood up, smiling at a colleague. "Time for my caffeine fix," she announced, heading toward the break room to get coffee. At exactly 9:43, a loud thud echoed through the open plan office. Everyone turned. Maria had collapsed. Sudden, massive heart failure. The paramedics later said. The office went silent, a vacuum of shock and disbelief. People were crying. Others were just staring. I didn't cry. I felt a profound, chilling cold spread through me. I grabbed my bag, mumbled something about feeling sick, and went home. I walked into my living room and just stared at the radio. It sat terra, silent and unassuming, an artifact of a bygone era holding a terrible, impossibly secret. That night, I was waiting. I didn't even try to sleep. The radio turned on earlier, 11:30 p.m. The same calm voice filled the room. We regret to inform listeners. Today's broadcast was incomplete. My stomach dropped. Incomplete. How could it be incomplete? Continuing with tomorrow's deaths, a list of names followed. Strangers, mostly. People from other towns, other neighborhoods. I frantically wrote them down, my pen scratching against the paper. Then, a few familiar ones. The owner of the corner shop where I bought my milk. A bus driver I recognized from my morning commute. Each name was paired with a precise time of death. The next day, I became a spectator to tragedy. I didn't dare intervene. I just watched, helpless, as the predictions came true. The shop was closed, a sign on the door about a sudden family emergency. The bus route was delayed due to a medical incident. Each one was accurate. I stopped sleeping. The nights were for listening, the days for verifying. I started writing every name down, creating lists, trying to find a pattern, a connection, anything. But there wasn't one. The victims were young, old, rich, poor. There was no logic, just a list. On the 4th night, I was a wreck. My apartment was littered with notebooks, filled with names and times. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. When the radio crackled to life, the voice was different, slower, softer, almost gentle. A reminder to our listeners, it said, its tone laced with something that sounded like pity. Knowledge does not prevent death. It only prepares you to accept it. Something inside me snapped. The helplessness, the fear, the exhaustion, it all boiled over into pure rage. I lunged at the radio, my hands gripping the wooden frame. "WHY?" I screamed, my voice raw. "Why are you doing this?" The air crackled with static, a harsh, grating sound that filled the silence. For a moment, I thought I had broken it. Then, the static subsided, and a new voice came through. It was different from the announcers. It was faint, whispery, like a voice carried on the wind from a great distance. It said just 5 words, "Because someone has to listen." And then the radio went silent, leaving me alone in the dark, the weight of those words crushing me. The first time it happened, the city thought it was a prank, a macabre joke played by some pirate radio station hiding in the static. At 11:47 p.m., an old-fashioned radio, the kind your grandparents kept in the attic, crackled to life in my apartment. No power cord, no batteries. It just turned on. A smooth, calm voice, the kind you'd hear on a late-night jazz show, began to speak. It announced a name, an address, and a time of death for the following day. Then, silence. The next day, the news reported a freak accident. A man, matching the name and address, had died. The time of death, exactly as predicted. Night after night, the broadcasts continued. 11:47 p.m. A new name. A new death. The city was gripped by a quiet terror. People threw out their old radios, smashed them, buried them, but it didn't matter. The broadcast found a way. It came through car stereos, Bluetooth speakers, even baby monitors. The police were useless. How do you track a ghost? How do you arrest a voice? It became a morbid ritual. The city would hold its breath at 11:47 p.m., waiting to hear who was next. We were all unwilling listeners, trapped in a citywide game of Russian roulette. The voice was methodical, impartial. It read names from every walk of life. The rich, the poor, the young, the old. No one was safe. It never explained itself. It just announced. I developed a sick routine. I couldn't stop listening. Every night, I'd sit in the dark, my heart pounding. As the clock ticked towards 11:47, I'd listen to the name, feeling a wave of relief that it wasn't mine, followed immediately by a surge of guilt for the poor soul who was chosen. It felt like I was complicit, a witness to a murder before it even happened. The broadcast became my obsession. I started recording it, trying to find a pattern. I analyzed the names, the locations, the causes of death, but there was no logic. It was pure, terrifying chaos, delivered in a perfectly serene tone. The contrast was the most unsettling part. This calm, detached voice dictating the end of someone's world. Weeks turned into months. The broadcast was just a fact of life now. A grim, unavoidable part of our daily existence. You'd hear people talking about it in hushed tones at the grocery store. "Did you hear last night's announcement?" They'd whisper, "Such a shame. She was so young." We were a city of mourners, perpetually grieving for strangers we'd never met, whose only connection was this spectral radio station. It was a slow, creeping dread that settled over everything, a fog of anxiety that you could never quite escape. Some people tried to flee the city, but it didn't work. The broadcast seemed to follow them. One report mentioned a man who drove hundreds of miles away, only to have his car radio turn on at 11:47 and announce his name. He was found the next day. Then came the night it all changed for me. I was sitting in my usual spot, the faint glow of my phone, the only light in the room. The clock hit 11:47 p.m. The familiar static filled the air, and then the voice began. It read a name, an address, a time, but after it finished, it didn't go silent. There was a pause, longer than usual. The static hissed and popped. I held my breath, my knuckles white as I gripped the arm of my chair. Something was different. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. My skin prickled. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe the broadcast had finally ended. Primera jagua es wrong. Then the voice returned, as calm and steady as ever. Next announcement, it said, and the words hung in the air. My blood ran cold. There was never a next announcement. It was always one and done. What was happening? The voice paused again, a deliberate, theatrical silence that made my heart hammer against my ribs. And then it said two words that shattered my world. Current listener. My mind went blank. Current listener. Who was that? Was it a category? A type of person? Then the horrifying realization crashed over me. I was the listener. The one sitting here, in the dark, tuned in. It meant me. The voice was talking about me. I couldn't breathe. It felt like an icy hand had wrapped around my throat. The voice continued, oblivious to my terror. Time of death. Tomorrow? 11:47 p.m. The world tilted on its axis. Tomorrow. At the exact time the broadcast had first started all those months ago. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a message, my own death sentence, delivered by the same phantom voice I had become so morbidly fascinated with. For a moment, I was paralyzed, frozen in pure, unadulterated fear. Then, a wave of adrenaline hit me. No. I wasn't going to be another name on a list. I wasn't going to die. I jumped up and lunged for the old radio on my shelf. I ripped the plug from the wall, even though I knew it didn't need it. It wasn't enough. In a fit of desperate rage, I grabbed the radio and hurled it against the wall. It shattered into a dozen pieces. Plastic and wires sprayed across the floor, but I still wasn't satisfied. The voice was still in my head. I knelt on the floor, frantically pulling at the wreckage. I tore out the speaker wires, yanking them from the circuit board until my fingers were raw. I stomped on the pieces, grinding them into dust under my heel until there was nothing left but a pile of electronic garbage. I stood there, panting, sweat pouring down my face, surrounded by the debris of my terror. The room was finally, blessedly silent. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on my couch, staring at the door, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. The sun came up, and I was still alive. A sliver of hope began to grow. Maybe I had done it. Maybe. I had broken the curse. The day was a blur of paranoia. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every unexpected noise made me jump. I barricaded my door, refused to answer my phone, and just waited for the clock to tick past my designated time of death. 11:40 p.m. 11:45 p.m. My hands were shaking. I watched the seconds count down. 11:46. Just one more minute. I was going to make it. And then, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. My heart leaped into my throat. A voicemail from an unknown number. My hand trembled as I reached for it. I knew I shouldn't listen. I knew it was a trick, but I had to know. I pressed play. A faint whisper, the same smooth voice from the radio, slithered out of the speaker. Broadcasts. Adapted. Before I could even process the words, the lights in my apartment flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness, and then a familiar crackle of static echoed from the corner, from the pile of broken, smashed, and utterly destroyed radio parts. It was working. The voice returned, its tone unchanged, as if it were speaking from a brand new device. Final clarification. My frantic hope turned to despair. I fell to my knees. Please, I begged the broken machine. I listened. I believed you. I did everything. Please, just leave me alone. I was sobbing now, my words choked with desperation. The radio was silent for a moment, and then it responded, the voice holding a new, chilling tone of understanding. "That is why you were selected." I stopped crying. Selected. What did that mean? And then, in a flash of sickening clarity, I understood. This wasn't about murder. This wasn't about random death. It was about continuity. The broadcast wasn't a killer. It was a self-perpetuating entity. It didn't just need victims. It needed witnesses. It needed believers. And by listening every night, by obsessing over it, by believing in its power, I had made myself the perfect candidate. I stared at the glowing wreckage of the radio, the truth washing over me in a cold, nauseating wave. I hadn't been a target. I had been on an audition. The voice spoke one last time, its words sealing my fate. "Your death has been deferred." I collapsed onto the floor, a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me black out. I was alive. I was going to live, but the voice wasn't finished. New role assigned. Broadcaster. The static swelled, growing louder and louder, a deafening roar that filled the room, swallowing everything. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The radio went silent. Forever. The next day, the news was filled with strange reports from all across the city. Radios turning on by themselves. The same station to summon time. But the voice was different. They said it sounded familiar, shaken, and very, very human. If your radio turns on tonight, don't turn it off, because the broadcast always needs someone next.